So today we're going to speak about the practice of self-remembrance. So the lectures we've given up until now have been, mainly informational and then a bit of practice at the end. But today we're going to focus fully on just the practice. We do this so, if you feel you're in a position where you want to do more, you want to, practice further, then you'll know how to do so. So we'll look at the practice of self-remembrance today. So we can begin by understanding that as humans, we can be one of two things at any given moment. We can be conscious or we can be unconscious. In other words, everything we do, everything, we can do it consciously or we can do it unconsciously. We can go for a walk consciously or we can go for a walk unconsciously. We can stand up consciously or we can do it unconsciously. We can talk with our friends and we can do so consciously or we can do so unconsciously. This applies to everything we do, everything. We can do it consciously or we can do it unconsciously. So what does it actually mean to do something consciously? As the word suggests, it means to do something and to be conscious of the fact we're doing it, which means to do it and to know we're doing it, or to be aware of the fact that we're actually doing it. So we can go for a walk and we know we're walking. We can listen to music and we know we're listening. We can speak with our friends and we know we're speaking to them. We can eat our food and we know we're actually eating our food. That's what conscious means. It means we do something and we know we're actually doing it. Unconscious then means the opposite. Basically, it means we do something and we don't actually know we're doing it, which for us really means we're doing something, but we're thinking about something else. We might be walking, but thinking about something else. We might be eating, but thinking about something else. We might be talking, with our friends, but we're thinking about something else. So to be unconscious basically means, we let our body live on autopilot, while our perception, thinks about whatever we'd like to think about. So let's be a bit more precise, though, in what we actually mean by this. So we said before, within us is that essence, which is a part of us that's conscious. And that essence is composed of two aspects, two elements. One is the will. The second aspect is the perception. And we said the will refers to all of the actions we do. Everything we do, getting up, walking, eating, all of these are actions. And we said that the perception refers to our senses, our sight, our touch, our taste, our hearing. So to be conscious means to unite these two forces, to unite the will and the perception, to combine them together so that they are practiced at the same time. Because the will is what allows us to do something. The perception is what allows us to be aware or to know that we're actually doing it. Like we said with the practices before, we listened to music and we knew we were listening. By listening to the music, that was an act of our will, to listen. To know we were listening was an act of our perception, to use our sense of hearing, to know that we were actually listening. If we sat down on the chair and we try to feel ourselves sitting, feel our actual body in that moment, by sitting down, we had an action of our will. By feeling our body, using our sense of touch, we had an action of the perception. If we went for a walk and we tried to look at the place around us where we were actually walking, by walking, we were using an act of our will. And by using our sense of sight to know what we're actually looking at, then that was our perception. So to be conscious, to know what we're doing, means to unite the will and the perception. So likewise then, to be unconscious means to have the will and the perception separated. I mean, they're not combined. That's what it means to be conscious. For example, let's say we do the dishes, but we're thinking about something else. We're thinking about a conversation we had yesterday. Our will is that we're doing the dishes, but our perception, is it there in the moment? Certainly not. It's in the past thinking about the conversation. If we go for a walk, but we're actually thinking about what we're going to do in work tomorrow, our will is that we're walking, but our perception is not there. It's thinking about what it's going to do in work tomorrow. If we are eating, but instead thinking about, what we're going to eat tomorrow, then our will is that we're eating, but our perception is that we're thinking about something tomorrow. It's not there perceiving that we're actually eating. We're eating on autopilot. We're not actually conscious of the fact that that's what we're doing. So, of course, to awaken the essence, what we want to do is to be conscious to everything we do, to actually know that we're actually doing it. Because when we do this, when we unite the will and perception, it creates a completely different state within us. We can say the will is the masculine aspect of the essence, and the perception is the feminine aspect. When we combine those two aspects, we create a blaze of attention within us, which is the very same essence. When we unite those two forces, we create a completely different state from that which is unconscious. Let's take an example of this. Here we have a match and a matchbox. We could say that the match, the one that actually has to do the strike, is the masculine force, whereas the matchbox, the receptive force, is the feminine one. When these two things, the match and the matchbox are separated, certainly they're very ordinary, completely mundane. However, if we unite them, then we can create something completely different. We create a fire, which you would never even imagine could be created. Because when things are separated, they are not that strong. But when those two forces are combined, then it creates something completely new. It's the same with the consciousness. The will and the perception, we all have them. But when they're separated, then that magical part of us, called the essence, cannot exist. It cannot be found, because it only exists when the will and the perception are united, because the essence is conscious, and if we're not conscious, the essence cannot be found. So I hope it's clear. To be conscious is to unite the will and the perception on whatever it is we are actually doing. So self-remembrance then, what does that actually mean? Very similarly, and following on from what we just said, self-remembrance is when we sustain this attention. In other words, that state of having the will and perception combined, we sustain it for a certain period of time. We're capable of keeping it there from moment to moment. This is what it means to live from moment to moment. In other words, we can't just have the will and perception combined in flashes. It has to be sustained. Let's imagine we're in a room which is completely dark, and we flick the light on and off. In other words, we get a flash of light, and we do it again a few times. That is what the will and perception is like. In other words, it creates a quick flash. But self-remembrance is when we turn on the light and we do not let it turn off. In other words, that flash of light is no longer a flash. It's constant light in the room. That is the difference between self-remembrance and the will and perception. Or let's imagine we have a lighter in our hand. If you try to flick it a few times to light it, you'll get a few sparks, maybe sometimes. That's what the will and perception is like, sparks of consciousness. But when we hold it, and if the flame is lit and we hold that flame, that is the self-remembrance, the difference between sparks and the actual flame. So self-remembrance is the very same will and perception, but we sustain it from moment to moment. That is the key of self-remembrance. Or another example is, like we said before, with the fireflies. If we have them all separated, certainly they create a very nice light, but it's very dim. But when they all come together, they create one great big light. This is what the remembrance is like. In other words, the essence is completely scattered, but as we remember ourselves from moment to moment, every second, that essence becomes more gathered and more gathered until it is usable for us. In other words, the essence, we could say, it actually exists. This is the key of self-remembrance. It gathers that essence together. On one hand, then we'll notice that the mind becomes a lot less noisy. In other words, it becomes much more quiet, silent. And on the other hand, we'll experience the qualities, the joy, the perception of the essence, spring forth, all based on this self-remembrance. Without the self-remembrance, the essence cannot come together. It'll always be separated. And then we'll never be able to say that we are conscious. So how can we sustain the remembrance in our daily life? How can we keep the remembrance alive from moment to moment? To begin doing this, we need an accessible way of actually doing so. In other words, we need some support to be able to do it. Like a child who learns to ride a bike begins with stabilizers, or a child who learns to swim begins with armbands, or a child who learns to walk, they begin by holding the wall or their parents' hands. Everything, when we begin it, we always have some kind of accessible way of actually beginning. Even the very same, if you're learning to write letters in school, we do it very big. Of course, we never do that in real life. But when it comes to learning how to do it, it's very useful. So one of the best ways to begin the remembrance is using a point, a reference point. What this means is, instead of trying to be conscious of everything, we just try to be conscious of a single point, of a single sense, whether it's our sense of touch, our sense of sight, sense of hearing, sense of taste, our heartbeat, our breath. We try to pick one thing, and we just try to be conscious of that. For example, if you remember, it was a good few weeks ago now, where we passed the ball around the room, together, but we were trying to keep our attention using our sense of touch on the feet. The sense of touch on our feet there was our point. In other words, we were still passing the ball around, but we weren't so much interested in the ball or what we were doing. We were only interested in making sure our attention was still on the sense of touch in the feet. That was our point. That is exactly what we have to do in our daily lives. For example, let's just say we have a ball beside us. Here I have a ball. We pick up the ball. That's an act of will, and we hold it. Then we feel it using our sense of touch. We really feel that ball. Here we have the perception. Now all we have to do is sustain that ball in our hand. We have to remember that we're actually holding this, to remember that we can actually feel the sense of touch on that ball. So we pick up this ball and we go around our house. We look at everything, but we never lose the attention on that ball. We never forget we're actually perceiving that ball, that we're feeling it. We talk to our friends, our family, our partner, but we never forget we are holding that ball. We never forget we are feeling that ball. We watch TV, but without forgetting that point. We eat our food, but without forgetting that ball. We go for a walk, but without forgetting that ball. In other words, we're combining the will and perception on just one point only. Instead of trying to be conscious of everything or using all the senses at the same time, we pick one single point and we make sure that we never lose the attention on that point. If just say we decide to hold the ball and we're talking to our friends, and then we check ourselves and we realize we've actually lost the sensation of the ball, then we know we've started to dream. In other words, we've forgotten the will and perception and they've become separated. On the other hand, if we check and we see we are actually still feeling it, then we know they're still combined. Then we know the remembrance is working well because we're remembering our purpose. We're remembering that that's what we're actually doing. We haven't abandoned ourselves to the dreams or fantasies or the mind. We've remembered the essence. That's an example using the sense of touch with a ball. We can do the exact same thing with the sense of sight, for example. In other words, we say to ourselves, I'm going to look and I'm going to know I'm looking. And this is my point. We always realize we're using our eyes. So again, we walk around our house, we look at everything, but we know we're looking. We speak to our friends, our family, but we know we're looking. We never forget that point. We go for a walk, we have a coffee, we watch TV. We do all of those things, but without losing that point. Everything we do, we never, ever lose that point. We never allow it to be taken away from us. It's like we defend it while we do everything else. The same we use the hearing, where we go for a walk and we're listening to noises around us, or we're listening to music, and we know we're listening to that music. In other words, we do everything we do, but without losing the sensation of that we're actually hearing. So I hope it's clear. The idea is we're conscious of just one point, not everything else. Our consciousness is so scattered that really we only have the capacities at the moment, because we're just starting, to be conscious of just one thing, not everything. In other words, we might begin just with a point. Later on, we'll be aware of all the senses. Later on, we'll be aware of everything in the room. Later on, we'll be aware of things that aren't even in the room. In other words, the consciousness will keep growing and growing and growing infinitely. But we begin from square one, which is the will and the perception. One single point, one single sense. Experiment with different senses, with different points. See which ones are actually best for the situation. For example, if you're speaking with your friends, the sense of hearing might be very good. Or if you're listening to music, the sense of hearing is very good. If you're going for a walk, maybe the sense of sight is what you like to do. Or maybe if you're cooking, you like the sense of sight there too. Maybe if you're having a shower or the very same walk, maybe you like the sense of touch. In other words, experiment with different points. The heart, the breathing, whatever. Try to find the one that works best for you in each situation. But the key is to always have a point in absolutely everything we do, because that point represents the heart of the essence. As long as we keep it there, the heart continues to beat. If we see the point is lost and we're no longer conscious of the point, our attention isn't there, then the heartbeat stops. The essence disappears again until we try again. But always have a point in everything we do. This is the best way for us when we begin to sustain the remembrance, is to pick one point and to keep our will and our perception, our attention on that point, to know that we can actually feel that point. That is the best way to awaken the essence. Because remember, we already know how to live. We know how to walk, we know how to eat, we know how to talk, we know how to write. All these things we already know how to do. What we don't know how to do is to do them consciously, to walk consciously, to eat consciously, to talk consciously, to read consciously. All of these things we have to learn how to actually do. So it's the very same life we lead. Whereas we don't change anything there. Our external life is exactly the same. But internally, we are trying to be conscious. Internally, we do have a different purpose than we did before. So externally, we continue living as very calm and serene people. But internally, there's a terrible struggle going on within us to make sure that point is never lost. To really ensure that internally, that point is there. Externally, we live the exact same, very calm and peaceful. But internally, we are always checking, even though no one knows, because it's a completely personal work. It's completely an internal world. We have to make sure that point is still there, that the will and perception are still united on that point. If we can continue like that, in other words, each day, practicing how to make it better, then we will get to the point where it's completely natural to to have the essence there. No, it's completely natural to do things consciously. We don't have to make any more efforts anymore. We've changed our natural way of functioning from being unconscious to being conscious. This is the goal we're actually trying to achieve. I always like the same movie we mentioned last week, the Last Samurai, and the character of Tom Cruise mentions, he's describing the samurai, and he says, they're people who from the moment they get up every morning dedicate themselves to the perfection of that thing they actually love. It's the exact same for us in this work. Each day, we're always trying to dedicate ourselves to perfect that point, to make sure we can do everything, but without losing that point. And then when we work this way, we can say that no day will ever lack importance. Any day, even if we do absolutely nothing externally, internally, if we're working to see how to be conscious in what we're doing, to keep the point alive, the remembrance, then we can say we're progressing very well. Each day is productive because we're always working towards our purpose. Step by step, we're learning how to actually remember itself, how to bring the essence forth within us. So the best way, in synthesis, to learn to sustain the remembrance is using that point, combining the will and the perception on that point. That's how we'll master self-remembrance. So the remembrance sounds very simple, and it certainly is. But is it easy? Certainly not. The remembrance requires its effort. Because remember, the consciousness has been asleep not only all of this lifetime, but all of those lifetimes previously. That consciousness has been asleep. The will and perception has been separated. To combine them again in a constant form, to get the essence to actually express itself from moment to moment, requires its effort. And the reason it requires this effort is because self-knowledge is a self-conquest. In other words, it's an absolute war against ourselves. We know that the natural part of ourselves is to dream, is to be unconscious, to live with the will and perception separated. To go against that nature, in other words, to change that nature from an unconscious one to a conscious one, requires us to fight against ourselves, our very own self. We have to face up against it to transform ourselves from something that's someone who's unconscious to someone who's conscious. This, like we said before, this work is a revolution of the consciousness. It's the psychological rebellion, because our normal psychology is to dream, and now we have to fight against that. In other words, within us, when we try to learn to remember ourselves, it is a true internal battle to be able to do so. A battle between the conscious part of ourselves, called the essence, and that unconscious part of ourselves, called the ego and the mind. The ego and the mind, they do not give up so easily. In other words, they will fight tooth and nail to make sure that essence does not manifest itself. Because the essence is essentially the enemy of the ego. That's why to do so, to be successful in this battle, we have to learn to use all of the qualities we actually have within us. All of that determination, that perseverance, that intelligence, that creativity, all of those qualities that we have within us, we have to learn to bring them forth, to put them all on the table. Only that way will we ever overcome the mind. Only that way will we ever overcome the egos. I always like a story from it's a book called the Mahabharata. It's a very nice book. But there's the hero of the book is called Arjuna. And I always like one bit in the book where Arjuna is with his two best warriors, his two best men. And one is very strong and one is very intelligent. And there comes a point in the story where the enemy is observing Arjuna with his two men. And they say to each other, that man on the left is incredibly powerful. And that man on the right is incredibly intelligent. But Arjuna, he possesses the strength and the intelligence of both of them. And for that reason, he is the most dangerous. He is extremely dangerous for us. And this is exactly how we have to be too. And with all of those, we say, qualities of the will within us, such as determination, diligence, perseverance, and all of those qualities related to the perception, such as intelligence, creativity, and strategy, all of them we have to learn to bring forth in order to be successful. We have to have the strength and the intelligence of ourselves to be able to be victorious. Remember, everyone can do this work. All of those qualities, all of us have them within us, in a potential state. We just have to learn to bring them forth, to find them within ourselves, and to learn to actually use them. Once we learn how to do that, it's to bring out the best of ourselves, then we will be able to defeat the ego. But certainly, if we never do that, in other words, we just wait for it to happen, in other words, we wait for the consciousness to just become conscious, that never happens. The consciousness has to be something we make happen. It will never just happen to us. I always like the quote from Christ, where he says, Heaven is taken by assault. The valiant ones have taken it. That's exactly it. To install the self-remembrance, it's to make the remembrance function from moment to moment. It's a complete assault against ourselves. It's against our own ego and our mind to make sure the essence is always functioning. It's not just something that just happens or is just given to us. We only acquire that power when we make the efforts, when we use our qualities within us, which all of us have, and we learn to use that so that we go beyond the ego and the mind, and we learn to make the consciousness the one that's always functioning. So I say this just so we understand the nature of the work, and that if we ever find it very difficult, to never feel bad, because by its nature it is difficult. But when we learn to make those efforts, in other words, go beyond our limitations, to use everything we have within us, then we will emerge victorious. In other words, we will have overcome our unconscious state, our unconscious aspects, and we will have established that conscious bit within us. Once we've done that, then we will be rewarded without fail. All of the power, all of the energy of the essence, all of the qualities of the essence will become ours. All of those things we talk about, concentration or conscious action, all of those things are ours. All of those things we have yet to speak about, such as waking up in our dreams, all of those things become accessible to us, because that is the natural path of the essence. But we can only begin that path once we learn to establish the self-remembrance, which is the very beginning of the essence. So it's a difficult work, there's no doubt about it, but it is possible, and the rewards transcend everything. And so, like we covered in the lecture on concentration, how do we actually measure our remembrance? Because we need to be able to see that it's getting better. Just like we said before, as athletes time themselves to see how they're getting better, we have to do the exact same. So what do we actually check? What do we actually monitor to see that we are actually getting better? The first, like we said before, is the time. How long can we sustain the remembrance? How long can we keep the point alive? It'll start as a few seconds, probably then go for a few minutes, then 15 minutes, half an hour, until eventually we get to 24/7. But the time is how long can we maintain the point. The frequency, how often do we remember the point? In other words, how often do we remember to unite the will and the perception? At first, we might even remember once a day. Maybe later on we'll remember twice, later on we'll remember 4 times, 8 times, and so on. How often do we remember the remembrance? Very simple, the frequency. The amplitude then is how intense or profound is the consciousness? What are we actually aware of? So you might see that you'll start to remember your dreams more. That's a very good sign that the consciousness is starting to become more active, it's starting to increase. Maybe we'll start even to wake up in our dreams. That's even better. Maybe we'll start to see that things in our daily life look different. We start to notice things that before, even though they were there before, now we actually see them as something completely different, something new. All of these are very good signs that the intensity of the consciousness is starting to increase. Generally, the first one we increase is the frequency. In other words, as these teachings become more important to us, now they might just be an idea, but as they become something alive for us, then we will start to remember ourselves every hour, every half an hour, every 15 minutes. It'll become something that's second nature to us, that we're always making sure that it is our priority and that we always are trying to remember ourselves. Afterwards then, we'll focus on the time where we try to remember ourselves for longer, from a few seconds to a few minutes, in different circumstances too. For example, first we might learn to remember ourselves while we're walking or listening to music. Later on we'll see how can we actually remember ourselves when we're in a party, or when we're at work, or when we're in a difficult situation. All of these things we have to learn to master. But so we want to make sure that our remembrance is getting better. This is how we do so. We look at these 3 aspects and we see, are they actually improving or not? So that's basically the practice of self-remembrance. We combine the will and perception on a point and we sustain it. But we'll look at a few readings too this week. One is from another instructor, where it describes the will and the perception again, and adds some more information too. But it's a good lecture which, if you ever have doubts about what the self-remembrance is, this lecture is very useful to get us clear again. I'd recommend you reading it multiple times, because as the idea is more clear, each time we read it, it becomes more clear, then we will be ready to act much better. We'll have a lot more strength behind us, because the idea will be very clear for us. So myself, when I first got this lecture, I'd read it day after day until it was clear for me how to actually practice it. Another thing we can look at, if we like, is from the Buddha. This is chapter 2 called Vigilance, which is the very same self-remembrance. It's the very same consciousness. For him, he describes vigilance and negligence, that is the exact same as consciousness and unconsciousness. But I like to give this lecture on one hand because it's fantastic, and on the other hand, it shows that this idea, this self-remembrance, it's not just a creation of our school. It's throughout all of the different teachings across the world throughout all the time. The self-remembrance, the vigilance has always been the very beginning. Until we have that mastered, how to actually live from moment to moment, we cannot progress further. So there we have it. Again, for the homework. Well, I hope it's clear since it's a practical lecture. But basically, all of the activities we do, or even just choose a few, before you do them, pick a point and try to keep your attention on that point. That's what we have to strive to do. Then, of course, we can continue working with those other practices, which is the very same point, such as listening to the music, feeling ourselves sitting, going for a walk. It's the exact same. The key is try to practice keeping our attention on the point. And if you have any questions about that, you know the drill. Contact us in any way you like, and we will try to clarify. Okay, have a good week.